Hello and welcome back. This is the last episode in our sex hormone series, and I saved this one for last on purpose because I think it's the one where the most misunderstanding happens. Your doctor put you on a cream, a patch, or a pill and told you that this would fix it. Maybe it was progesterone, maybe it was testosterone, maybe it was a combination HRT approach. And here's what I want to talk about today. What actually happens when you go on one of those treatments and nothing else in your life changes. So let's start with progesterone because I think it's the most misunderstood hormone in this entire conversation. Progesterone does more than most of us were ever taught. It has a calming effect on your nervous system. It supports deep sleep, and it helps balance out estrogen's effect throughout your cycle. And when progesterone is where it should be, you tend to feel steadier, you sleep better, and you handle stress with a little bit more resilience. And here's why this matters so much for you and why we're talking about it in this series. Do you remember back in episode 1 when I talked about cortisol sitting in the base of the triangle underneath your sex hormones? Here's exactly why that matters for progesterone specifically. Cortisol and progesterone share a common building block in your body. And when your system is under chronic stress and constantly demanding more cortisol, it will prioritize making cortisol over making progesterone every single time. So if you've been living in a state of chronic stress for years, and let's be honest, most of us have, your body may simply not be making the progesterone that it should be. Not because something is broken in your body, but because your body is in survival mode and it's choosing the hormone it thinks will keep you alive over the one that regulates your cycle. And just like estrogen, progesterone is also supposed to change over the decades. It naturally declines through perimenopause and settles lower postmenopausal. And that gradual decline on its own, that's not the problem. The problem is when cortisol demand is so high for so long that progesterone drops far more steeply and far earlier than it naturally would because your body is being forced to choose. This is why so many women get put on progesterone cream and feel a shift for a little while, and then the shift fades. If the underlying stress response, that cortisol piece, never gets addressed, you're refilling a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. Now, testosterone, it's a smaller piece of this conversation for most women, but it does matter, especially as we move into perimenopause and beyond, because testosterone, it affects energy, it affects mood, it affects muscle mass, and it naturally and gradually declines with age in every woman, starting well before menopause. That gradual decline is normal and is actually expected. But when it's low, women often feel it as fatigue, flatness, more than as a migraine trigger directly. But because it's part of the same interconnected hormonal picture, addressing it in isolation without the rest of the triangle underneath it, it rarely holds either. Now, I want to talk about HRT, birth control, bioidentical hormones directly, because I don't think doctors are wrong to prescribe them. And I don't think you're wrong for trying them. These treatments exist because they genuinely help some women some of the time with some symptoms. That's real. I'm not discounting that. But here's the thing that I want to say because almost nobody says it out loud. Sometimes a woman goes on the pill or starts HRT and she does feel better. Fewer hot flashes, less anxiety, less of the short fuse feeling, and she thinks, this is it. It's working. But the migraines are still there, or they come back in a few months later because what is actually improved were the side symptoms sitting closer to the surface. Not that underlying inflammation driving the migraines and driving the symptoms themselves. That relief can be real and still not be the whole answer. And it's easy to keep relying on a treatment because it's doing something, even when it isn't doing the thing that you actually came for. I think about Kathy. She's another woman that's been in our community a while. She described her hormones, evening out over time. And she said she went through a lot of hot flashes early on, like so many women, just starting this work do. And it took her a while to realize that was part of her body's healing process, not something to panic over or medicate away immediately. And the hormone she said that made the biggest difference for her wasn't even one she thought of as a hormone at all. It was insulin. She was heading towards becoming type 2 diabetic like the rest of her family. And now she consistently is seeing blood sugars under 100. Kathy said she didn't realize that when she started this kind of work, how many other things would come into alignment just on their own. That is that triangle action. She didn't go after progesterone or estrogen directly. She addressed what was at the base, and the tip started just to sort itself out on its own. And I want to close this series with another woman in our group, Jessica. She said, because, what I want to tell you what she said, because I think it sums up this whole 3-part conversation better than I can. She said she'd been reading about hormone balancing in perimenopause and had this realization that the reason her other hormonal symptoms were improving, it wasn't because anyone treated a hormone directly. It was because all of the other work she'd been doing for her migraines. She called it a reminder that what she was doing was changing her health in more ways than one. That's the whole part of this 3-part series. Your sex hormones are not broken. They're not working against you. And it's completely normal for them to shift as you move through your 30s into perimenopause and beyond. They are responding the way they were designed to everything happening in the base of that triangle. Cortisol, insulin, thyroid, oxytocin. Address those in the right order, and estrogen, progesterone, testosterone very often start to find their own balance without a single patch or pill. Now, if everything that we've covered in this series has you wondering where you specifically fall on that triangle, whether your base is actually stable or whether cortisol, insulin, or thyroid might be quietly undercutting your sex hormones, that's exactly what a migraine breakthrough assessment is for. It is a free one-on-one conversation where I walk you through your history. I walk through that. I map out where your particular foundation is solid and where it's a little bit shaky. Now, this isn't a generic hormone panel. It's not a one-size-fits-all protocol. I look at your specific pattern and tell you clearly what I see and what I think is actually driving your migraines. You can grab a time with me using the link that's right over in the show notes. And if you're not ready for that, that's not you right now, just come join us in the Women's Migraine Freedom Group. It's free. It's full of women living through exactly what you're living through. And it's a great place to keep learning until you're ready. Thanks for listening to this series with me. I will see you next week, and here's to your migraine freedom.